We're tackling tonight. Hitting children as a form of discipline has and is still being used in many Kenyan homes, though some have challenged that method's effectiveness over time. Well, despite corporal punishment being banned in schools in 2001, it still persists in pockets of our education system. Furthermore, with reports of arson in schools, vandalism, and other forms of indiscipline, who bears the burden of disciplining our children? All these questions form our discussion tonight on discipline a generation. Joining me in studio are Bishop Dr. John Warari Wakabu, here in his capacity as a member of the Interreligious Council of Kenya. We also have Milcah Nyambura, a children's guidance counselor and a parent of a high school student. And last but not least, Mercy Chege, Director of Programs in Quality and Strategy at Plan International Kenya. She drew up guidelines for alternative forms of punishment. But before we begin, let's listen to this view on discipline by the Interreligious Council of Kenya Secretary General, Dr. Francis Kuria, earlier this week.
Young children should not be beaten, but there was an agreement that within certain age group, corporal punishment cannot be completely removed from the development and discipline and development of ethical values in children. It is a controversial subject, but that was the end of that policy discussion within the Interreligious Council of Kenya.
All right, so let me begin with you, Bishop. We heard your colleague there, Dr. Kuria, talking about the possibility of bringing back corporal punishment to schools, but for older children. And this after consultation among members and just looking at the current situation in our schools when it comes to indiscipline. But what formed that conclusion by the council?
Thank you for having me in the studio today. I must say this discussion or this pronouncement that was made by our CEO was in a round table engagement that we had at Hekima University, 28th and 29th of last month. And life is a journey, it's a process, and we are learning. When I came in this studio, I've seen some advancement, and I'm very happy because it's not like I left the other day. So in correcting children, I think we need to come together and ask ourselves, what are the latest findings about a child development? Is it healthy to spank or to reintroduce the corporal punishment? I believe the religious leaders, after this round table that we held, are coming up with a different look at this. I think we can embrace the new findings because I hear there are scientific findings that have come up. And we should also know that Kenya is a signatory of some protocols that speaks about the UN right of a child.
Right.
And indeed, we have signed and we cannot retract.
Exactly.
And we have to go by what the international community would have us do. So although the Bible clearly speaks about sparing the rod and spoiling the child,
right,
the same Bible says that our Lord Jesus will rule this world with the rod of his mouth. So interpreting it, I want to believe it's not the actual rod of hitting somebody, but it's a corrective word. It's a word that is full of love. It's a word that when you receive it, is going to change you from the inside.
Yeah.
We as Christians, we cannot, excuse me, sorry for this, altogether throw away the scriptures when it speaks about correcting.
Yeah.
But we must embrace what science is telling us. We must embrace the better way to go about speaking to our children, and that has proved positive. I'm a father of 5 children, And I'm happy that they are all serving and they are good citizens. And we've come a long way. And sometimes I regret some things I did to them because I was ignorant. I wish I had gone through what I've gone through now. I have learned a lot.
Yeah.
So I believe the best is to talk and dialogue.
Instead of physically
punishing
a child.
Yes.
So this actually kind of goes against what your colleague had said in terms of bringing back corporal punishment, because corporal punishment really is the physical hitting.
I'll tell you what, Vicky, that we did it. We in parenting, we tried corporal punishment, and it can work to some extent, because there are some of our children, if you try to lift a stick, they will lift you wholesome because they are strong, they are healthy.
Yeah, yeah.
And so can we look for alternatives, really?
Yeah.
Because I believe we have what we call positive parenting, where you can correct a child.
And let me bring this to Milcah. As a parent and also as a guidance counselor for children as well, do you find hitting, beating is effective? Because even when I put the question out to many of my followers on Twitter, quite a few of them said, yes, I was beaten as a child. Yes, it was effective. But quite a few of them also said, I don't know how effective it would be now with this generation, which is very interesting when looking at that. But in your view, what do you make of it all?
I wouldn't hit a child at this moment because it affects them psychologically. At the news right now, we see so much violence. It's because us, we were punished as children.
Yes.
So it's socially acceptable to adults because they were punished. So I am so against the corporal punishment.
And Mercy, you've been working on guidelines to kind of look at this practically in terms of how do we formulate ways of reaching them that will not entail putting a hand on them or touching them with another object.
Yes, I am part of a working group that is coming up with guidelines. Actually, the guidelines on positive discipline in school is complete.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for the Ministry of Education to be able to launch that, because we figured out that we can do it for the CSOs, and we interact with a lot of children, but it is best anchored on a government agency, and we chose the Ministry of Education, and they have been very positive about that. It's taken a bit long, I think the last 3 years, but I think we are getting somewhere.
Right.
And I personally input the part on positive discipline, because I've gone through training. I'm a trained counselor, a psychologist, and I think the day I interacted with positive disciplining is the day my firstborn was 5 years old, and I purposed to put down the cane. And I would say my boys are in college. They have turned out quite well, and we don't fight. We have a lot of issues, but we have a way of solving it without a fight.
Right.
Because when you can, it doesn't make a child better. It makes them resentful. It humiliates them, especially if you do it like in high school in front of others. And that damages the self-esteem of a teenager. I think the worst place to start caning a child is in high school, or class 7, class 8, and in high school. Because at that point, we need to be cognizant of what they are going through. Their peers are their world. If you embarrass them before their peers, they become very, very, very embarrassed. And they resent it, and they can even start now planning on how to revenge. And I'm not justifying the actions that students have done in schools, or even children at home who have come close to beating up their parents. But it just has that effect on a child that they would want to revenge. And I think we shouldn't drive our children that. And I'm glad that the Interreligious Council is rethinking their start.
Yes.
It would have been very, very sad for us to reintroduce corporal punishment. And just to mention, Victoria, I don't think that teachers don't cane. I've parented through high school, And it is only my son in Starehe who never said the word cane. Starehe doesn't cane. But elsewhere, I can tell you the teachers never put down the cane.
And that's the thing. So it's banned, but you know, they still insist on it because they feel it's effective, or they feel this is African. This is how we discipline our children
how we were
from generation to generation. You know, so it's also a very tough practice to kind of bring out of the schools, despite it being banned in 2001. Before we move on to maybe some of the issues that contribute to the indiscipline and bad behavior that we see in schools, let's take a look at some feedback on social media. We put the question out to some of our viewers, and on Twitter, David Kinuthia saying, were it not for that beating, I think I would have died long ago. I support it 100%. Another one here still on Twitter, Joy Mdivo saying, was I beaten? Yes. Did it have an effect on my behavior? Oh yes. My thoughts, or the thought of Kiboko Peke made me do homework. Should it make a comeback? Yes, with guidelines on who can spank and regulations on the type of Kiboko for use in schools and criminal sanctions for misuse. Do we have another, Robert? Yes. Griffins Omwenga saying the cane is even prescribed in the Bible. I support it 100%. If my father didn't straighten me using the cane, I would be Nyambura now in a drinking den. And another one here, Osumba Oyo saying, yes, I remember during our times in primary, that is between 1990 and 1999, where fellow students in leadership assigned to bring canes for beating, for discipline. Respect was maximum with students growing within the rail of code of conduct, or rather code of conduct. Such cases of burning schools couldn't be there. Wow, this is overwhelmingly in favor of caning. And as you were speaking, Mercy, I was just thinking, why couldn't this have come when we were being caned?
When we were young,
yes. Because yes, it is traumatizing, but from what we've seen from many of our viewers, and at least on Twitter, they said it worked. It worked for us. And you talked about alternative ways of doing this, but let's talk about the behavior that we're seeing in schools. It can't be denied that it could be getting worse. And people are wondering, is it because we don't have that element of punishment and hitting our children? But Bishop, let me begin with you. What do you make of just the current state of behavior from your observation in schools?
Well, I think it's unfortunate. And it calls for a lot of deep reflection and investigation as to why it's happening and happening at this rate. But let us also agree that there are other factors that are in the play. For example, there was some change in the education system, and some people are not happy about it. It said that there were some cartels that were sponsoring the banning of schools and all that. Then we have issues like this is information age. Our children are having gadgets, and it's not like our days. So these people are way ahead of us. Then again, unfortunately, there is the issue of drug abuse. And with drug abuse, you expect anything. I was surprised when I heard this case of a young standard 5 boy who would always insist to get some cash to go and buy mandazi at school. And eventually he became very violent when the mother would not have the money to give to him. And it was discovered later that the mandazis they were buying across the fence were laced with drugs. So already at class 5, this young man was an addict.
Right, being exposed.
Yes, he's exposed. And what do you expect of that person? His faculty is already warped, and he can turn violent. And he needed a lot of counsel and patience, because he also did not understand himself. All he knew was that mandazis were very, very, very good, and he would have a kick. I mean, it will give him a high. So we have a myriad of problems today, and I don't think the violence on these angels is going to change anything.
Okay, let me come to you, Milcah. You know, when it comes to, and this has kind of been a debate, when it comes to who bears the discipline burden of our children, considering that the kids do spend a lot of time in school.
Yeah.
And of course, compared to the time they spend at home, parents may not have that quality period with them to discipline them and find out what's going on in their lives. But in your view, in your take, who really does bear that burden today?
The parent. Because as they are young, it's the parent that teaches the child how to behave. So whether they spend a lot of time with the teachers really does not matter. If the child has been brought up in the correct way, the student will know how to behave. Yes, so it lies with the parent.
And I mean, when you're dealing with a high schooler or a teenager, what methods do you use, practically speaking, you know, for other parents who could be watching?
Communication. The students in high school just need you to understand them. You know, most teachers talk at the students. They don't talk to them. So once you understand where the child is coming from, you will get to understand what the problem is, then solve it. You understand?
Yeah.
So communication. Talk to the children. Yes.
Now, we have a caller, Emmanuel from Kahawa West, who wants to add his voice to the discussion. Go ahead.
Okay, hello?
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you, Emmanuel.
Like, that required, for example, at in like focus, mtoto ameenda shule, that's applicable, but then at home was need to not need to one to go.
Okay, we seem to be having an issue with Emmanuel's line. Hopefully we can get him back on. But I want to get to you, Mercy. When it comes to, and we mentioned this earlier, caning still going on in schools.
Yes.
And when they go too far to where a student is injured, what should be done, you know, for the parents who are aware that this is going on? What should be the course of action in dealing with this issue?
A very complicated situation, Victoria, because you do not want to interrupt the education of your children.
Right.
But you know, when you report a school is caning, and there are ramifications, and the owners of the school, even if it is the government, knows that, it becomes a case against your child and against you, and you drag in court, and you know, there is all this defense, you know, around the school management. But I think if it goes as far as you can show the injuries, I think the first place you land is in hospital and the police station, and you get a P3 form. And I don't think any parent should fear going to court to say, my child was caned and I have evidence that this is the injuries that were sustained.
Right.
I think that is the direction we should go. Because when we banned corporal punishment in 2001, like you said, and for a very good reason, because of students who are being beaten and dying. You know, even if the court was not able to link the two completely or relate the situation. A child is caned and they fall unconscious, and then they go to hospital, and after the post-mortem, after the post-mortem, it says that it is a heart attack. So you can't link the two, and we have not had any success with any child who has died in the hands of the teacher being linked to the teacher. They have never been charged for murder, because there is always another reason. Right. You know, a heart attack, a heart failure, something. And the other boy who was said to have died of hunger, it is true he hadn't eaten for several days because he was weak, so he slept in class, and the teacher came and hit him on the back of his head, and he didn't wake up. And then it was like, oh, he was hungry, that is why, you know, his mother died, was living with the, I mean, there are all those excuses. But I think for me, when we banned the cane in 2001, we should have been more proactive to come up with, if you don't cane, this is what you do.
Right, right.
That has missed until 3 years ago when the CSOs came together with the Ministry of Education to develop the guidelines, which have still not been adopted. So more than 20 years down the line, the teachers still are not clear on what they need to do. And I think that is a failure on all of us. It's a failure on the society. And the Convention on the Rights of the Children, the one that Bishop was referring to, is turning 30. In November.
Wow.
And we are still banning, we are still caning children, we are still violating their rights, and we are comfortable. I think it's a sad situation.
Absolutely. And we have another caller, Kendi from Machakos. Kendi, go ahead.
Hello.
Hello, Kendi. How are you? We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Winfred. Winfred Kendi from Kuria.
Yes.
I wish to thank the panel for giving us a direction on this and highlight this.
Yes.
And especially on the alternative disciplining of the children.
Yes.
I like the point that Mercy Chege is putting across about the spectrum of the teenagers. I also work with children, young people, and what I have learned is that once you punish a child as a teacher, they feel they have paid the price fully, so they don't have anything to be remorseful about.
Yeah.
But if you engage them for a conversation about what they have done and how they can change maybe their behavior, they really work for themselves now to know how they will be able not to repeat the mistake again.
Right.
The point I'm putting across is once you beat a child or a teenager, they feel they have paid their price for their mistake, and that's fine. So they know when they do it again, they'll be beaten, and that's fine. But if you engage them, they will now work as groups. We work with them now, they have the leaders, they sit in groups and decide that if someone does what we do, so it's because they know there will be no one punishing them. But if the term is used by the teacher, they feel, see, the teacher will just beat us up, and that's fine, that's all. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Kendi. And of course, now concurring with what you were saying, Mercy, when it comes to...
She's my colleague, actually.
Oh, look at that. And being effective when it comes to disciplining, especially teenagers. But just to move the conversation along, Bishop, when we talk of the roles of other bodies that will interact with these young people, of course, Milcah said parents have paramount responsibility when it comes to disciplining their children. But churches, mosques, other religious bodies, when it comes to their role in disciplining this generation, where do they fit?
They are right in the center because the faith organizations, for example, in this nation, 8 out of 10 people belong to a particular faith. And so faith has a very important role to play. And in all the faiths, their principles or their tenets is the well-being of the child, the well-being of every one of us. And I think they should come together as stakeholders and ask ourselves, in a way of a strategy, how do we carry this thing forward? Because in all the faiths, there are norms and there are values. Our government has given us laws, and these laws should they should be implemented and amended to fit the current situation we are going through. And not only are the faith organizations caregivers, we have other people that come in, parents, for example. And a research done actually showed that a child spends about 71% of his or her time with the teacher.
True.
And the rest with the parent.
Right.
So I think it's a corporate endeavor. We must strategize. We must come together and ask ourselves what can be done. For example, in the religious fraternity, we can offer safe environment. We can offer guidelines and teachings. We can, we feel it's our responsibility to teach morals and values, but we cannot do it alone. We need the parents, we need the teachers, we need the government, we need the whole society, because the child does belong to all of us. We need the media. And I'm very happy that tonight we are using your platform
Yeah, and forwarding that whole idea of it takes a village to raise a child. It really does, especially in this day and age. And I'll just get the closing remarks from you, Milcah, and Mercy. But Milcah, I'll begin with you, just on this whole general discussion on disciplining this generation.
Well, I would say that we should develop trust. Because once the child trusts you, you will not need to punish that child, because you'll be able to understand where he or she is coming from. You'll be able to understand their problems and solve them. So trusting each other in the school community, it takes time, but it's worth it.
All right, building that trust, very important.
Yes.
And Mercy, will close with you.
I think I want to say that disciplining a child is not a one-time event. It is a lifetime of creating a relationship with that child, and you have to invest your time, you have to invest your emotions, and you have to invest time to train. So if you have expectations, let the children know about it. Set your boundaries, set the rules, and make sure that you implement them. If you have that kind of an understanding, whether it is in the class or it is at home, I don't see any conflict coming up. And when it comes up, you've already set the consequences, then you implement them. So there shouldn't be any conflict, and we shouldn't say that the children are being unruly because they are not being caned. When we cane them, they become compliant. It instills in them fear, but they don't necessarily become obedient.
Also opening up those channels of communication between the kids, parents, but also parents and teachers as well, as you partner in disciplining them. Exactly. Let's get some feedback from our viewers really quickly as we wrap up. I believe we are going to Twitter and just to see what their responses are to the conversations so far on this. Last time, of course, we saw quite a few of them saying that they were in favor of corporal punishment, many of them from the generation where they were beaten as children, and they said it worked. So here we go. Twitter, Florence Kivuva saying, no, it should not. Any change in behavior that results from corporal punishment is usually temporary, because a punished behavior is likely to reappear once the punitive consequences are withdrawn. Instead, verbal methods of discipline through explanation and reasoning should be used. I can see Mercy and Milcah vigorously nodding their heads to that. Imani, the question should not be, were you beaten as a child, but were you abused in the name of discipline? Very good point. Beating in this case refers to using a cane right. You are not asking the strength of the teacher and the impact of pain because it varied. All right, on that note, that does it for this discussion and Citizen Weekend. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you so much to my guests for coming in and just beginning this whole discussion on how we effectively discipline this generation. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.